Well, thanks for everybody for coming this evening. I really do appreciate it. I hope you'll tell your friends about our meetings every Wednesday and Saturday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. They are both live on Zoom, and we live stream them on our YouTube channel, New Tracks. The second train show scheduled for November the 21st, 1 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern Time. We've got about 10 new vendors for the show so far, and looking forward to a really special event. The first one was very successful, and I think you'll find that this one, we're doing everything we can to improve on it. Will even be better. Shortly, you will be able to go to our new YouTube channel, and instead of having to watch the whole train show to find a manufacturer that you want to get information about, we're going to be posting individual videos for each of the manufacturers that appeared at our last train show. So each video will be roughly 7 to 8, 9 minutes, something like that. And you'll be able to find out the name of the manufacturer and go to their specific video on our YouTube channel as soon as we've got all of the information put together and can get it posted. We have posted for the total train show. This will just make it easier for you to go and find a specific manufacturer. We have a website now called newtracksmodeling.com. And if you will go to that website and register, then you'll be able to get an email from the website directly about all of our future New Track shows and events. Tonight, we're fortunate. We have a really talented modeler, publisher of 2 magazines for the model hobby. And his name is Dan Dawdy. I met Dan, I don't remember how, a little bit over 3 years ago. And unfortunately for him, he decided that he'd take a gamble with me and post in his magazines one of my articles. And we started talking after that, and I've been writing articles on New Tracks in both the S-scale resource and the O-scale resource that he and his wife Amy publish, and Dan is the editor of both of them, for about 3 years now. So Dan, I really do appreciate you being here tonight. I look forward to hearing about your magazines and particularly seeing your modeling, because you are one fantastic model.
Appreciate that. That's pretty high praise. I hope I can live up to it here.
You can, no doubt in my mind.
What I thought I'd do is break this into 2 parts, one of the modeling and the layout that we're building here, and then the other part we'll talk about the magazine. So I guess we'll get going. If I can share the screen, which I guess I'm doing. So this is me. This is me back in the day. I don't even remember this layout. This was my dad's Lionel layout. So as you can tell, I've been in this for quite a while, model railroading. The house we moved into that I remember, of course, everybody has the cat on the layout, but this is how I got my start. I started Lionel. You'll notice if you're a Lionel expert, you'll probably faint here because I took all my post-war engines and decided them to my own colors, and you can barely see it there, but that's the Richmond, Danville, and Southern, and that was a play on words that my dad came up with, and we'll get into that a little later. This is the only other picture of the old layout. We used Gargrave's track, Lionel track in the yards. This little bridge up here, my dad built out of cardboard. Basically, he scored it, cut the openings out with an X-Acto, and hey, it lasted 15 years. And when you're 10 years old, it looks pretty cool. But after the Lionel, I thought that they were going to go belly up. This is 1970.
Dan, you're breaking.
I decided to go to O-scale 2 rail.
Dan, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry. It says my connection's unstable. I don't know what that, okay. All right. Is this any better?
Yes.
All right. So when I went to 2 Rail O, the first thing I bought was a West Side Q4B. There's nothing like getting a piece of brass when you have nothing else, but that was my thought process for some reason. But in the early 80s, I was in a group called the Southern Wisconsin O-Scalers with Larry Bunce, the late Kent Barlow, Nick Manarino was in there. And we started doing mall shows. This is just a picture of how huge this thing was. We had to build our own trailer to carry it around. This is Train Fest. We were the first O-scale module to go into Train Fest. This is 1982, but it just gives you an idea how big this thing was. And the last show that I did with this group was the Chicago National at 1984 at the O-scale convention. And then I went back to school, got a degree in electronics. We moved down to Naperville, Illinois, and that's where I met Ted Schneff at the DuPage County shows. It was a guy that was selling O-scale. Who would have thought? And Ted and I became good friends. As you know, if you know Ted, he's building a ginormous layout at his house, which will probably never be finished. But we used to go over there on the weekends and help him out on Saturdays. And I learned a lot. Amy learned a lot. My kids learned a lot. But we were stuck in an apartment for 12 years. So all I could do was build stuff. I couldn't have a layout, but I was buying stuff, building stuff, knowing someday we'd have one. The Richmond, Danville, and Southern, again, was a play on words. My brother's name is Richard. My dad's name was John. So I kind of charted this out. If this would have been a real railroad, this is kind of where it would have gone. In the area that I'm in is the area town of Avalon. But I talked to Ted and I said, look, first of all, this is the house we bought in Dwight. This is where we live now. Not a big house, 27 foot by 29. Workbench was here. I had to take that out. The furnace, of course, had to stay. The sump had to stay. This was a brick wall and chimney that had to stay. The stairway had to stay. This laundry area was kind of weird because it's poured concrete. The basement was poured concrete, which is unusual for a house this old. About 6 feet, so there might have been a cistern in here or something, I don't know, but there was a hole in the wall here, which we'll talk about later. But this was the elephant in the room. This was a poured concrete wall that held the house up, and that really had to go out before we could do anything. But while that was happening, I had Ted come down and say, look, I need you to design me a layout because never built a layout. I don't want to design something that I start building and realize isn't going to work, so help me out here. So I told him, I said, I want to be able to come down here, maybe have a couple of fingers of whiskey and run trains, or have 5 or 6 guys down here to do an operating session. So this was his original plan, which we stuck with for the most part. Large yards. This was what we affectionately call now the Widowmaker. It's not 3%, it's more like 4.8. And I'll show you why later. We'd come around, go up to the upper level. We had a turntable and a engine house here and a reverse loop to come back. The upper section, Ted got a little carried away. We really couldn't do the staging up here because it was too high off the ground and too far back, and it just wouldn't work. So basically the upper level now is strictly a huge reverse loop and come back down again. That's the wall. The contractor came down literally with hammers and mauls to bang it out. And we had a beam put in, and that really opened up the basement. So my first job here was to put in new lighting. This is 2007, I believe. And I had to order the tubes because daylight tubes weren't readily available at the time, but I wanted to be able to photograph down here. Now we're putting in LEDs. But you can see this step here, and this was the way the floor was poured, but it's about a 6-inch step down. So I wanted to build the layout where I didn't have to worry about rear legs. So I came up with this idea, coming down from the sill with just 2x4s. And this horizontal piece done, I could have dev level, and all I'd have to worry about is the front legs. So that's how we started this. And up until this time, it was just me. There's nobody around here to help. So I just started doing this on my own as I could. Put the masonite up. These masonite hit a 2x4. So I could lick once it pulled the screws out, mudded it, taped it, and mudded it again. And we've had no problems with this. I've never had a crack. Of course, I had help because I had to take pictures, so she's up there doing the work. That's Amy. But when she was finished with the backdrop, again, it's perfectly smooth, and that has never buckled anywhere. This is 3/4 ply. It's really overbuilt, but Ted told me to do it that way. You're going to be on top of it. You're going to be crawling around, so make it sturdy. And the top is covered with Homosote. This is the pre-yards. I wanted to build the yards first. Again, up until this point, I'm on my own. But I wanted to get track down because you're doing lighting, you're doing electrical to play with trains. So I didn't just take this out started with. Since then, we have gone to hand laying our own switches, but this is what I had to start out with. And this is what the yard lead looks like now. This is the main line. There's a passing siding. This is a storage track, but it does have an outlet on the other end, and these are all stub tracks. And this just goes behind the station. And now if you flip the camera around, this is where we start to go up the hill. And this is where Glenn Guerreras came down to help. Glenn was a cabinet maker. He owned Mullet River and worked for the California Museum. He's done work for IMR on their wooden cars. And he is a carpenter, which I am not. So I was happy to have his help. But you can see we start the spline work. There's a door in the basement that goes up a few steps out to the backyard or up into the kitchen. So this, of course, had to stay. So Glenn built this this swing out door, and it's been again for over 10 years. We built a small bump out here for a town at the bottom of the Widowmaker, we call it, and we started the spline work heading up the hill. This is the main line. That's the passing siding. They join into one line to go up the hill. And this is the line going into this little town. I wasn't about to buy 400 clamps for one job, so we just made our own clamps and made it work and got this together. And that's the hole in the wall that I talked about on the earlier. You can see where the poured foundation starts. I couldn't chisel past this. This was it. I got some bricks out, but this was it. So we started on the other end, dictated what the grade was going to be. And it's a little big. Like I say, it's 4.8%. Think of Saluda. In fact, we're going to Saluda next week. We'll be out there. I've never been there before. So anyway, this was going to be a helper district, obviously. This is the only part of the basement my wife gets, washer and dryer. Everything else is mine. We go over the top of it. There was a toilet down here, which was handy, and of course the paint booth, and there must have been another dryer because there was another hole in the wall. This just shows the spline coming through, and I roughed out the tunnel. And this is where the second story, is, if you will, comes in. So I decided to hang these heavy hangers rather than going down and over. We came, up and over. We came down and over because I figured we could hide this with a backdrop. So this is how we went around the layout. Each one of these hits a 2x4 for strength. And again, we're overbuilding with the 3/4 ply. The so it was glued onto the bottom where the two tracks are, and then hoisted up and put in place. And this just shows it coming all the way around. And put the fascia on. We come up the hill, as I said, in a single track, but then we merge to double track for passing siding and then go back to single. And this is the end. And this is where Glenn came in. very handy. We stopped, and this is where we're going to have to suspend the loop. So Glenn came up with this plan in AutoCAD and worked this out. The minimum radius is 65. The minimum radius on the entire railroad is 64. That's the best we could do with the room we had. And luckily, I don't have any Coles engines that need 100 and, 100 and some degree radius. So I was good here. But we cut the opens. A crew could bring a train up into here after their assignment, stop and bring another train down so that they have a different switching setup. So it wouldn't just be going up and right back down again. So we can actually stash 4 full trains up here if we wanted to. But Glenn took this design, took it to a buddy of his, had a CNC machine, and these pieces were precision cut and came back in like a jigsaw puzzle. We simply put it together. I suspended everything. You can see we did the biscuit deal here up to this whole thing. I got it all the way around and secured, and then I dropped the overhead to stabilize it and level it off. So this entire thing is suspended, and it's pretty rock solid. The switches here, again, single track coming into a double track to go around, come back out, back to single. And this piece, just kind of remember this for the next couple of slides here. I measured all this out, cut the homosote, and I built the switches down here. A whole lot easier than up on top. And when they were all finished and laying, I just put the track together. This is all on the upper deck. Everything on the main line. This is DCC, by the way. Every switch on the main line is tortoise controlled, so I can control it from the computer, the handheld, or the phone, whatever I want to do. Any switch or turnout that's in the yard are all manual. And that's just a shot of the finished product. The last thing we had to do was this area, which was that was one more shot of the whole thing. You can see that this was Glenn's carpentry work again. I couldn't come up with this, but we had to have a place for the roundhouse and the turntable. And so he came up with this design for stability. It's probably, again, a little overbuilt, but it worked out well. And I tell you what, when you get a turntable and a roundhouse, you don't know how much real estate you need until you put that in there. And as much space as we had, we were running out of room. So the turntable that I had to cut down a little bit to fit. This being a helper, this is not a heavy repair roundhouse. It's basically a light repair and storage for the helper engines. So what happens here at the end of the yards, we come around into the servicing facility. This track does a complete loop, and this is the bottom loop, goes over here, pops out on the other side, goes behind the water heater and back out. And then this track goes down to lower staging where there's 3 tracks underneath the layout. So it's actually, I guess, triple deck. Millhouse River round turntable, expensive, but they're rock solid. The roundhouse, talk about modeling. I just didn't want a dirt floor, so I bought a bunch of Kapler dimensional lumber and hand laid it. Looks really nice when everything's put together and lit up. Of course, we have frog juicers on all the frogs, all the turnouts, as well as the turntable. And this is what it ended up looking like. And I still got a lot of work to do here, but the break here for the other side is where the coal mine's going to go. So the scenic break has to be finished yet, but there'll be a coal mine in here, and either here or here, there will be a switch to get into this area. So that's the last bit of work I have to do. The track's all down. We just got to finish out and start doing some scenery. This rock wall, this is where the oil maker goes up. And Gary Engel, who's a tremendous modeler, O-scale modeler from Indiana, the first couple of issues of the helped me with this. We did an article on how to do this. The backdrop here was strictly cardboard strips and hydrocal with paper towels. And luckily for us, there's a supply house in Chicago up the road that sells hydrocal in 50-pound bags for about 20 bucks. And we got 10 bags. Compare that to what you pay for a little container at the hobby store. But we needed a lot. And then we got these rock molds and started putting the rock up. Pour the hydrocal in these. They're going to weigh about 20 pounds. So it took both of us to get it up. You can see one there that's in position, and while we're waiting for it to dry. But these rock molds are really nice. I had about 8 of them, different types. But as you apply them to the wall, you can turn them in different diagonals, different ways, so you don't get that. There's no repeat pattern by doing it that way. But this is what the wall ended up like. Excuse me. And now we can come through and put some, little tree steps and some greenery up here. But probably 800 pounds of hydrocal when we got all through with it. I'll show you just a couple of the buildings real quick. As I say, because I couldn't do any modeling for the months I was in the apartment, or years, I should say, 12 years, I started doing buildings. I built this for my daughter. Not that she's a wino, but she pronounced Baloo as a child instead of blue. So I thought I'd make her this little tavern. And these are just some of the kits I built. I like to do the interiors. I put enough interior in so you know there's something going on. They're not super detailed, but again, you're going to be looking at this through the window, so you don't have to have everything in there. I have a propensity for my own cigar store. This is another kit that I just I decked out. A lot of this stuff was just scratch built counters and so forth. There's some castings in here. The cigars are nothing but a picture. I took pictures off the internet, did them in Photoshop, put a little shadow behind there. So if you look through the window, it looks like there's actually 3-dimensional things here, but that's just nothing but a black picture. Smaller stock kits I built, named one of our dogs. This building was going to go in that little town underneath where the Widowmaker went up. I built it. It turned out to be too big, so it's excess. If anybody wants a little Northwestern style building, I'll be happy to talk to you. But again, just put enough interior in to there's something in there. And I guess that harkens back to my Lionel days. Lionel, all the buildings lit up, they all did something, and I really like that. So just being able to light everything up and have something on the inside that people can, look at. Gas station, I think this is the oldest building. I think I built this in the 80s and hauled it around with me all these years. Howard Super Service, if you're anybody Three Stooges fans out there, you'll know what that means. Again, an interior, just enough to show you there's something going on. And of course, the boys had to show up to bless the gas station there. The icing dock is the extension. All these cars, again, these are probably got 24 of these things that I had built back in the day before I had a layout, before I had a house. I built this for a buddy of mine. Maybe you know him. His name was Ed Rutling. He was quite a character in the O-scale world. So I dedicated this to him, and he got a kick out of that. There's a joke behind that. When we were up in Sault Ste. Marie, we got a couple of tours through the shops, and they had a sign on the side of the roundhouse that says no urinating, if fresh air. It's kind of fun there for Ed. And some more warehouses. Again, Three Stooges here. I had to get Ted Schneff in the area. So these are all kits. A lot of these kits you probably recognize, some you may not. But again, all these things were built way before the layout. And now I have a place to put them. This you probably won't recognize, but I'm sure you know a guy named Delano that used to shoot pictures back in the 40s. Worked for the government. He had a picture of a red house building, new and used furniture, and there was actually a couch on the roof, and so I kind of built this to mimic that. That's one of Glenn's Mullet River kits, and this is what the downtown's going to look like eventually when it gets finished off. Real quickly, the locomotives. This is the roster. It's pretty much up to date. I have a for PAs. I love the engines. These are all Q4Bs. I had a pile of those. I'm down to 3 now. But this is interesting. The CarWorks came out with the HH series, the 660s and on, and the Fairbanks H2044s. And again, in O scale, as in any scale, really, if you see it, you better buy it because it may not be around much longer. And the early diesels are very hard to find in O scale. So I grabbed those. I grabbed these just to have them. I don't think these will ever be done in brass again. The RS ones are Atlas, at least on the first issue, which we'll go over later on. The Atlas RS ones, the original ones, were not very good runners. They had issues. They had pickup issues that we solved. And I also wired them in series. And by doing so, it dropped my amperage and it dropped my low speed. So these Atlas Elcos will run at about 1.5 scale miles an hour, which seems to be a benchmark for some reason. The real railroads don't go that slow, but I can do it. And the thing is, these all have the original Tsunamis, 1 amp decoders. And people say you can't do that, you shouldn't do that, they take too much power. Well, look at the amperage draw. These top 4 have been serviced for 12 years, and I've yet to lose a decoder. The downside for you people with China drives, by wiring them in series, is that if you're underpowered going up a hill, one motor may stop turning while the other motor takes up the slack. It's like having your old car stuck in a snowdrift and one's on the concrete. You hit the gas. That's the only downside. It only happens if you're under load, but it clears right up, really quick. So the other motor kicks back in, but that's one of the downsides. I got a little carried away with the T1As. I've always loved the coffee water heaters. I must have been asleep back in 2003 when Sunset came out with them because I missed them. And it wasn't until about 3 years ago that Jack McGarry had one from Allegheny. And I was going to bring it to Chicago. I bought it, and I've never seen one before. I put a decoder in it, runs flawlessly. 3 months later, we were at Scale West, and there was a dealer there with them. Had to have the way I roll. Picked up another one. And then at this last Chicago show in March, just before this COVID stuff really hit, our advertiser guy, Jeb Kriegel, came around and said, "Hey, there's another T1. And Amy said, "No, you're not going to buy it." I said, "Well, let's go look at it." We went over, looked at it. The guy gave me a price, and even my wife said, "That's a good price." So when my wife says it's a good price, you buy it. And then I had another one, and Mr. Blackwood, I see, is here tonight. He had one that was for the Southern Pacific. The story I got from Bruce is that he sold it. It was delivered. It was damaged. He got it back. I said I'd buy the engine for parts, and you can keep the tender, which is what happened. So now I have a damaged one that I'll use, and I'll just stick it next to the roundhouse. But it gives me a good engine for parts, whether it's a motor, drive belts, whatever I need. And then the last of the stuff is the Burrow crane. That was whatchamacallit, help me out here. Yeah, I can't think of the importer right now. That's what happens when.
Is that Overland, Dan?
Thank you, Overland. Rich Yoder's Fairmont Speeder, and there was a Model T4 that someone had done as a track thing. And I've actually got decoders stuck in those things too. That's the Z1. I only have one of those. I got that at the Rock Island show. That was years ago. That show is long gone, but that was a Northern Pacific prototype. One of the engines. I don't know if you can see this. I hope it doesn't. Maker. This RS1 is a NJ International that I put in passenger colors because it had a steam generator. The train in the background is a wine train. My wife and I kind of like wine, so I actually, whenever I see a wine car, I grab it. And she gets on this around. And coming up here, I think, in a second. That's a lot of wine. The black was a Thomas tank car. It 1940s era kit that I built, and it's a beautiful kit. If you ever find one, you know, scale. I did a whole article on that, how I built it and modified it. Real quick, some of the engines. This was from Ed Rutling. This was an S2. This was an English kit. Went to my colors. These are the H2044s. Because my cutoff is in 1947, I could squeeze these in. I do all the interiors and painting myself here. These are the Elcos. These are the 660s. This was another one from Ed Rutling. This was a Canadian prototype, a one of. That was an etched metal kit that he built, and I modified it. Named it for my buddy Neville over in Australia, and this will work the coal mine when that gets put in. PAs, I had 3 from a guy in Madison years ago. I picked up 2 more from an auction site, got them dirt. But when I had these PAs, Lou, the guy that took over from Bob Smith, took these back and modified them with a heavier weight for the fuel tank and the motor with the flywheels. The problem was that these shafts were coming apart and the gears on the axles were spinning free. They were press fit. So I'm sure most of you know Jay Griswold. I sent him the parts he remanufactured, did all the wheel work, and notice how the frame bends here. The only way to test these is when they're bolted back onto the frame of the engine. So it's kind of a pain. You got to put the whole thing together to test it to make sure the wheels everything's in alignment. If they're not, you take it all apart and fix it again. But the PAs will be for the passenger trains. The Q4Bs, I had a fleet of them. I sold some off. I have 3 left to get service also. And of course, the fleet of RS1s. Back to Rutling, he had done a casting of a proper Atlas fitting for the front, so all my engines have those. The ones that Atlas had weren't really correct. And of course, the Burl crane. And that's the layout. That's the layout part. That's where we are. You know, maybe some other Zoom meeting we can talk about cars and rolling stock. One of the things that I'm very cognizant of, and I harken back to Jack Delano. If you look at some of his pictures in the 40s in the yards at freight cars, there's all different sizes. There's tall, short, long, all kind of things. And when I first started out, I used a lot of Atlas stuff because Atlas was, you know, they're beautiful cars. They had pretty paint schemes on them, but after a while, they were the same color, different paint schemes. And so I should start building something. And older kits, Mullet River kits, getting other types of cars on the layout so it wouldn't look all the same. And that's kind of where we are now. So if there's any questions on the layout, I'll take them. Otherwise, we'll just move quickly into the magazines.
Dan, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When you're building a model, how do you know when it's time to stop building that model and move on to something else?
When I get irritated. Really. Sometimes you get irritated. And that Thomas tank car, the black one you saw, I said was a Thomas kit from the 40s. And I did a whole article in the magazine about that, and all the back issues are up there. I'll show you that later. But the one thing with that tank car, the center beam was just a piece of brass. And I wanted to go, when I modified that beam, I screwed up the entire body so the tank wouldn't fit anymore. So sometimes when you modify these kits, you try to make them better, you dig yourself into a hole, and you just got to get out of it. And sometimes that means walking away for a few days and thinking about how you're going to do it. Other kits like the Mullet River kits and so forth. I mean, Glenn had so much detail, so much great brake rigging and stuff. You're done when you're done. I mean, you can always put something else on, but because this is a layout and things are going to get bumped around, I don't go super detailing. These don't sit on a mantle, they actually run. And there's just some things you have to forego. You want to get the, in my case, I'm happy if it looks real, if the parts are there, and I'm happy with it.
Thank you.
Is it going to be is it going to win a contest? No. So the magazine, I grew up on this one. The original one was done by Dan Heenan, I think, Indiana. I met him a couple of times. I remember we went to the Indy O-Scale show. God, that must have been 82, 83. That's where I really got my feet wet going to these shows, even before I had a layout. And then he sold to Tom Nixon, who was the publisher up here in Illinois. And the editor was a guy named Greg Heyer, who was a tremendous tremendous that camera. Him and his wife Joyce put this magazine out for years and years and years, and it was a great magazine. And I think there was some guy doing a trolley article in here too. I forget his name. Yeah, he's probably here somewhere watching tonight. But
for about he did that for about 25 years.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened. They had some hard times. I know they had some equipment failures, and there was some other issues that I really don't want to get into, but they fell behind. And if a magazine falls behind, especially a print magazine, you got all kind of problems to try to catch up. Not one of which is the post office, because you have to keep your numbering consistent, and fell a couple of months behind. They tried to catch up. They had more problems. Well, when all this was going on, this guy popped up, and Joe came up with this magazine, and it was a magazine publication today under White. He had a good crew with him. A lot of Brian Scase, Martin was in there, Jeb Kriegel, a lot of guys. And it was the magazines coexisted for a few years, and then unfortunately these guys, Greg died way too young, and Joyce couldn't do it herself, and I think Tom really had much to do with it other than the money behind it. So unfortunately it just died, and this was what we got. And Glenn and I were talking about doing something on the web for O-Scale, and we started a little website called the O-Scale Resource, and based sold advertising to show people what you could get. And you could go to that site and see the ads from the people and click over to their website if they had one. This is still 2008, so I mean, not everybody had websites in those days, but this magazine kept going, and I enjoyed it, but there was something about it. And I don't know, I couldn't put my finger on it. I always hearkened back to here. There was just something about this magazine, the way it was written, the way it was put out, that I just enjoyed. And I just never got that feeling here. And then Joe, and I've talked to Joe about this many times before he passed, but he was, and I don't take this the wrong way, because I really like Joe, but he started getting a little preachy. And my philosophy is, in our man, I'll tell you something. I want to show you how I did it. If you got a better way, if you got a different way, that's fine. But some of the editorials coming out of here where, this is the way to do it. This is it. Don't even think of anything else. And that, I just didn't like that. And then there were some personal attacks that he did in his editorial. And I just didn't like it. And I told Joe, I said, I'm thinking of starting my own magazine, be online. And he said, yeah, go ahead. Nobody's going to read an online magazine. So okay, well, what do I know? So in 2013, we came out with, that's a picture of Glenn, by the way, if you don't know who he is, Glenn Guerrera. We started the O-Scale Resource. 2013 was the first issue. And the philosophy was here, let the advertisers pay for it, put it up online. Anybody can read it. Anybody can download it. Anybody can do with it. And there, unfortunately, Joe passed away, and issue. But we came out with this, and then if I can do another screen grab, maybe. Come on. Okay. So this is where we are today, the O-Scale Resource Magazine. And our philosophy was a couple of things. Glenn and I did most of the articles in the beginning, and then we got more people on board. And one of the things I wanted to impress was I wanted to start building again. I mean, so many of the other magazines, not O-Scale specific, but some of the general magazines, there's no building articles. Everybody just pulls it out of a box, puts a few details on it, and away you go. And I wanted to get back to the old school. I mean, O-Scale is a builder scale. I think you got problems, those worse off. And I also wanted to get different opinions. And if you've all the back issues are up there. Every one of them can be read, downloaded, whatever. But if you look at our authors, the authors of these articles are from all over the world. There's a guy down in Bogota, Colombia, Serge, who's doing tremendous work, Sergio. Who knew? There's a guy in Canada. We've had people from France, England, New Zealand, Australia, all write articles for us. And these guys are tremendous modelers. And what I tell them, the other thing we try to do too, is I don't like to do a lot of, we have the one nice thing about an online magazine is that we don't page count. Magazine has to be worried about that. You got 68 pages, you can't add one more. That's it. So some of the articles that get sent in get chopped up a little bit. The pictures are too small or what have you, but they have limitations. So we don't have to worry about that. So if it's 100 pages, 120 pages, doesn't bother me. But I did want to do, we don't do a lot of editorialing. We check for spelling. We make sure it's readable, and we print it, because so many other magazines, you would swear that when you read it, it was all written by the same guy, because that one editor that oversees it kind of makes it feel that way. So we don't do that. You really get the flavor of the author. If he spells color C-O-L-O-U-R, that's fine. That's his native tongue. We stick with it. Just to give you an idea, that's Amy actually owns the company. I just work here. That's me relaxing. And then Jeb Kriegel is the guy that handles our advertising. Now, he used to work for Joe. He handled the O-Scale Trains advertising. And when Joe passed away, he was let go.
I don't think I'm seeing everything.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it. Dan.
For whatever the reasons were. What?
We cannot see it. We just see the original cover.
Really?
Really.
Well, why is that?
I don't know.
Oh,
Technology's deciding to mess with us.
all right. Let me try. Let me try it again. I'm sorry. Share screen. Now what do you got?
Oh,
Now we
we
got
have a
it.
new screen.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm sorry about that. Jeb used to work for O'Scale Trains, and when Joe passed away, he left, and then a couple of years ago, he came to work for us. Now, did this carry over? Is there a new screen?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on, we're looking at just over $6 per issue, and that's worldwide. And if you look at the paper magazine, it has a hard time with. And this has been the fun part for us. We've met others from all over the world, and people, you know, that you wouldn't think would have O-scalers in them, and they're there. And there are a lot of younger people, which of course we find on Facebook. You go to O-scale shows and you think everybody's, you know, walking around with walkers. There's a lot of young people out there, and you know, they're looking at us, they're writing for us, and they're doing some tremendous stuff. There's a lady over in Austria who came over to the Chicago show, Sarah, and she went back and she's turning her own wheel. She's doing P48 now. Got herself the lathe, got some lessons, and I mean, she's building a lot of stuff, and it's amazing. And the guy up in Canada is doing some tremendous stuff too, with his layout that we've featured a few times. So the point is that people from all the world looking at this, and it's worked out for us. You know the old joke, you know, how do you make $1 million in model railroading? You start with 2 million, and that's kind of the way this is. Advertising pays for it, but nobody's getting really rich here. But we do it because we like it. And we have other information up here as far as dimensional data and stuff you may use. We also have videos that we've done for the magazine. Some are just videos of O-scale shows. Some are more involved. I did a whole video on cutting glass, working with LEDs and stuff. All this stuff is up there online. Year after, this was 2013, about a year after, Glenn in Plymouth, Wisconsin, who was an S-scaler, and said, you know what, we ought to start an S-scale magazine. And I said, I don't know anything about S-scale. I'm Lionel guy, remember? We didn't like the S-scale people. That was below us. But he said, we need a scale magazine. And he said, I'll do the writing. And all you got to do is put together and publish it. I said, okay. And we got the S-scale resource. Unfortunately, about a year and a half later, Glenn's buddy moved away. Glenn got ill and was hospitalized in a pretty sad state of health there for a while. We thought we were going to lose him. But the point is, he said, I don't want anything to do with the magazine anymore. I'm out. You guys can have it. Set up your own LLC and take it over. And you're on your own. Well, that was tough for S-scale because I didn't know anything about it. Luckily, we had some articles in the can, and we went on the road and started got to know them. Ron from Des Plaines Hobbies was a great help. It's really sad that we lost him way too soon. But he was big into S-scale in the store and got me a lot of contacts. So the magazine has persevered. It comes out 1 month, O-scale comes out the next month. We just go back and forth. It's not as successful. There's not as many S-scalers out there, but I really felt that we needed a scale magazine. And I think as far as S-scale goes, the future is in scale. If you go to RPM meets, Glenn used to go there with his models in O-scale, and some of these guys would buy them. And well, Glenn said, what are you going to do with them? You got a layout? And he said, no, I want to build this and put it in the mantle. I mean, the detail is wonderful, but I'm an HO. Well, as these HO guys get a little older, or these N-scale guys also get a little older, they may be looking for a larger scale, and it's either S or O. And I think S is the perfect scale. I really do. If I had to start over again, I'd seriously consider going to S scale. But the point is that if they're coming into S or O, they're not going to go high rail. They're going to go scale. And the NASG, which is the National Association of S Gaugers, that's kind of been a back and forth. They're really a high rail magazine. They don't focus on scale that much, but that's, you know, as those guys die out, you're going to have scale. That's all that's going to be left. And that's why I keep hanging on, hoping this magazine will make it. But again, the RPM shows are a great place to get people involved in both S and O. When they see the detail that you can do, it's just amazing. So anyway, the magazines continue to thrive. And a lot of our articles do contain building. Real quick here, if I can. I hope you all can see this. This is what the magazine looks like online now. And this was the issue I did on putting decoders in an RL. And again, a single tsunami. 12 years later, I've never lost a decoder. But the rock molds, this is Gary's layout in Indiana. Went down there, worked with him, brought back what we knew. And we do a lot of proto articles as well as modeling. And it's been successful. And I hope you, if you haven't read it, please do. Like I say, it's free. Everything's online, both magazines. And the magazines do have some carryover. There's some articles, and Jim's article is a good example of this, where we'll get a new Tracks article from Jim, and unfortunately, it's not exactly O-oriented, S-oriented, but it's general enough that it means something. And so that's why, that's why I like his articles and continue to run them, even though they're not really scale specific. They don't have to be. So anyway, that is my blurb. That's my spiel. Maybe like I say, someday in the future, we can do another one with people that actually build cars in rolling stock. I've done a lot of that and have a lot of pictures, but I didn't want to go too long tonight and bore everybody. But anyway, that's my hobby. That's the magazines. That's where we are, and that's what we do here.
I've seen a lot of notices that popped up that there's more in SN3 besides me and Dave.
Oh yeah, yeah. There's the gentleman out in Arizona. You probably know who he is. I can't think of his name.
Who, Jan Rons?
Who?
Jan Rons.
No. There's another guy out there that actually sells track parts too. Anyway, we out and photographed his layout, and I sorry, I can't think of his name. But yeah, SN3 is a big deal, as is, and of course the same thing in O scale. ON3, ON30 is big, and we'd like to get more articles there, but for some reason the narrow gauge guys are kind of an entity unto themselves. Sometimes it's hard to break through, but there's a lot of fine modeling done in the narrow gauge stuff. And we'd like to get more articles, both O and S. So anybody have anything to contribute, believe me, we'd be more than willing to work with you.
Well, I could just say this about us narrow gauge guys. We're definitely weird. I know I am. I can't, I'm at risk of getting people to look at me and go, I'm not weird. Yes, we are. We're narrow gauge guys. We look for the weird stuff, the purposely out of this world, like, oh my God, they actually built that type stuff. The Cuban locomotive, diesel built on the chassis of a 10-wheeler. That comes to mind because someone just built one of those. And it looks amazing because, and not only that, it's unique, it's different. We like different here. So yeah, no, I think I could safely say us narrow gauge guys are weird.
Daniel, I have a question for you. My name's Greg. I've been modeling in HO for a long time, and most recent years, I've been building mostly craftsman structures for other people, for their layouts, for customers and stuff. I'm just embarking on scratch building my first O-scale structure. And is there any one mistake that I should watch out for converting from HO to O in scratch building something that I have overlooked?
That's a good question. As far as structures go, I really don't think so. You're going to use dimensional lumber just like
Yeah.
you would in HO.
I've got blueprint for what I'm working on.
Yeah, so I think
I
I
feel
don't think
comfortable, but it's that almost too comfortable. You know, what am I missing working in a scale I've never worked in before?
I don't think anything with wooden structures. I don't think anything. Where the problem came in, and this was the problem that Glenn always bemoaned. He would come out with a kit in O scale, a laser cut kit and all the brass under rigging and so forth. And some guy would come up and say, "Well, can you do that in HO?" And Glenn would say, "Yeah, I got to redraw everything. Got to do this. Got to do that." And they said, "Well, no, you use SolidWorks. Just tell it to switch scales, and everything will come out fine." Well, you can't do that. And people don't understand that. Some of the dimensions don't come out fine because you can't get the material in those dimensions. Mm-hmm. So it's he literally had to redraw a car to convert the scale. You just couldn't push a button and have it do it for you. And that's something people didn't understand. But in what you're doing, I don't see a problem. I use Kapler lumber only because he's got all the dimensional stuff I want, and I'm sure anybody else is just fine. But I've just worked with the guy. But yeah, when you do buildings and wood, what's the difference? I mean, you could build a dollhouse, and I don't think you'd have any other problem. Paul Vaughn,
Yeah.
Steve Hatch was the guy I was trying to think of.
Yeah, I couldn't come up with his name real quick. Sorry.
Hatch was he's got a layout in Arizona. About being off the grid, we drove to his place. He is in the middle of nowhere. And he's got his own solar, his own generator. He's just, he's an entity down to himself, but a beautiful narrow gauge layout.
As with most narrow gauge layouts, they all have a Colorado theme, unfortunately. I like the White Pass, East Broad Top, Plaster City, just to name a few narrow gauge railroads that had nothing to do with Colorado.
Which is interesting too, because a lot of them too. But you go to a layout and here's Durango on March 7th, 1945, and you go to the next layout and here's Durango on June 3rd, 1946. It's all the same stuff with a lot of these guys. But it's nice to see other narrow gauges being modeled, and especially the main stuff. I've never seen a decent main 2-foot layout before, but I'd always be interested in looking at that. And I always thought about that too, but it just wouldn't fit with what I'm doing. But there's room for everybody in this hobby and every type of skill. And I've always said that if you look at the magazine and look at my articles, and Glenn's especially, if I make a mistake, I'll let you know what it is, so you don't do it. I don't hide it. I don't throw it in the trash can. I work my way through it. And you're going to make mistakes when you build kits or scratch build or something. There's always going to be a got you somewhere. And don't be afraid of it. Just work through it. Just don't be. People are just so afraid of screwing up, they don't even try. And there's so many wonderful craftsman kits out there. Yeah, they're a little basic. But you can add the detail and make something out of them, or at least practice with them. I mean, when I was at O-Scale West, there was a guy dumping Ambroid kits in O-Scale for $5 a hit. Hey, for that, you can build them. If you screwed up that bad for $5, throw it away and start over again. But do something. Just don't be afraid. And you learn so much stuff. I mean, I got in the electronics industry basically because of model railroading. Again, Lionel, taking stuff apart, putting it back together. And that ended up being a career path. And it's helped me and got me where I am as far as a career goes. But also as far as building layouts, I mean, you got to be an electrician, you got to be a carpenter, you got to be this, you got to be that. It doesn't happen overnight. It just takes time. And if you're lucky enough to have friends around the neighborhood help out, I just live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. So if it wasn't for Glenn coming down to helping me, I don't know where I'd be now. But it's fun to get with people and just share experiences.
So you want to meet some N2 modelers that have good layouts?
N2.
Like SN2, ON2, HO.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I would like them to get in contact with me. And I know Dylan sent me some stuff when he had new products out. But I love to do layouts. I know there's a narrow gauge magazine out there that's very popular.
There used to be an SN3. It just died. Well, he retired.
Right.
And they ought to do an SN3 annual, but that's just my opinion. But yeah, SN2 does exist. I know a couple guys who do it. There was a really big Sandy River and Wrangell Lakes layout. I don't know if it's still up, but I can get you a website of it. Yeah, we model on HON3. And not just the main, but there's a couple of 3 Gilpin guys that do SN2. I don't know if anybody knows what the Gilpin is.
That's another Colorado railroad.
Yes, it's a Colorado railroad, but it was not 3 foot.
2-foot gauge mining tram operation out of Blackhawk, northwest out of Denver. That was 2-foot shades, predominantly with unique ore cars and very little other. And the ore cars often ran downhill by gravity. So there's your tram summary.
And the engine house was an old barn.
Is that what you modeled, TC?
I modeled the Gilpin as if it was in Idaho. And we don't have a long enough show for me to talk about that. I talk too much anyway.
But no,
The question was, do you model the barn?
There's a guy who's done it in HO. If you go to Free Rails and look for Gilpin, Keith Pashida, something like that, he has got tons of research, and he's done every single mile of track and all the photographs, and oh man, it's a ton of stuff.
I didn't even see this group chat on the side. I'm just reading what everybody was saying. I just saw this for the first time. But yes, ON3, ON30, SN2, anything like that. We would love to have articles on that. Just get a hold of me. And one of the things we do, obviously we can't travel to every layout. But if the owner or the builder can take decent pictures, what we normally send out a questionnaire, and they just fill it out. Because a lot of these guys don't want to write. I can't write. I can't do this. I can't do that. So we send them a questionnaire, and they send it back. And Amy writes up an article based on their answers, and then we send it back to them. And once they see that, they can say, oh, well, yeah, let me put this in here. Let me put that in there. And then they send it back, and then she adds to it, and we build the article that way. A lot of people, we always get this. Well, I can't write. I don't want to write. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Look, fine. Just send me the pictures. We'll call you, and we'll just talk to you, and we'll get an article out of you. But that's kind of the way we work. And we do travel quite a bit to see layouts. But of course, right now you can't go anywhere. We are going to Strasbourg in 2 weeks for that. That's the first train show since Chicago for us. And hopefully it'll continue. It's supposed to go on one way or the other. But we'd love articles on anything like that. Even if it's not scale specific, scenery articles, anything like that you want to share with the work that you've done, we'd be more than happy to look at and publish. And the nice thing, again, I mentioned it before with page count, if you get a little wordy, it's not a problem. If you have pictures that we want to, put full screen or full page, we can do it. We don't worry about it. We don't edit your stuff down. That's the one advantage we have over a paper magazine, that we can just go whole hog. And I think, as Jim can attend to, because Jim could never publish his new Tracks article in a paper magazine. He couldn't do it. I mean, there's just no rule. I'm talking about like another paper magazine, O Scale Trains or whatever. I mean, his articles just sometimes get so long and so involved, it doesn't bother us. But a paper magazine would have a real problem giving him 30 pages in a 60-page magazine. And that's something we don't have to worry about.
And that's exactly the reason that I started getting interested in both of Dan's magazines. Because like I say, I wrote for 48 Foot O Scale News for years and years and years, but the articles were short, and it just wasn't the same for me. This way, I don't have to worry about the subject. I don't have to worry about the length, and I just go from there. And the other thing that I'll comment too is what Dan is saying about you don't have to be the greatest author in the world to submit an article. He's exactly right. No question about it. I hear it all the time from guys saying, "Oh no, I could never do that." It's easier than you think. If you'll just try, if you'll just sit down and take pen to paper and send it to Dan and go from there. That's all it takes. Even if it's the first paragraph, send that and see where you can take it from there. It's just not as hard getting something published in one of his magazines as you might think it is.
Somebody is wanted.
I don't worry about it. Nancy, I'll get the phone. Anybody have any more questions for Dan?
I'll be getting in touch with him later.
Good, I appreciate that.
Yeah, I would say the presentation was a lot better than your connection. You kept on you kept on going out every now and then, but I would have to say it was a very good connection or a very good presentation.
I don't know why that happened, but it's AT&T. What are you going to do?
That said, I think your modeling's excellent, Dan. I remember seeing the first picture of the Widowmaker on Facebook, and I just went, "Wait, someone did that?" And I was just looking at it, and I was amazed. And I just remember just the sense of scale you get from that cliff face is just it blew my mind. It honestly did. And I can't think of many other layouts that really give you such a sense of scale. Like, hey, this is bigger than just the train. There's more to the world. I can't really think of many. I mean, my buddy Dan Bigda, his layout comes close because he modeled the Bondsville Trestle. Well, his doesn't have a rock face that goes up the entire length of the wall. That really gives you a sense of scale. That makes you feel like you're in the mountains, like you're in West Virginia or something.
Yeah.
It really sets the location, and that is brilliant. I love that. And seeing how you actually did it, oh man, that must have taken some work to really get that done because it looks good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it was a lot of work, but it was a lot of fun, and we learned a lot. And I will recommend those rock molds to anybody. If you're doing something like that, these rubber molds are fantastic. Use them over and over again. They're anywhere from 6 inches to 18 inches, and by moving them around and turning them different directions, you won't get any kind of a repeat pattern. They work out so well, and they're so easy to use.
Is there any special storage for those molds?
Any special? Oh, I'm sorry. What?
Any special storage
No.
for the mold?
No, those are thick rubber molds. Not at all. I just wash them out and throw them in a drawer.
Thank you.
That's it. And I don't even know. I don't even know who made them. I bought them from Ted Schneff at Rails Unlimited. I'm sure you guys, maybe some of you guys know who made them, but I know they're still in business, and they're not cheap. They're 20, 25 bucks a hit, but you only need a couple of them to do that kind of a job. And it's just, I've seen guys on YouTube and stuff where they put the plaster up and they start carving it. And I said, no, I can't do that. That wall's too big to hand carve. and I don't have that kind of patience. So if I can find a shortcut that's good, I'll use it. And those molds worked out really well.
Hi guys, Clark Cooning here. Mostly, I think they're probably Bragdon's, Dan.
I don't. They might be. They might be. Yeah, you could be right. I thought his were smaller, but again, these things are 18, 20 inches. But yeah, if they may very well be his. But they're rugged. You can't really hurt them. You can't tear them. They just work well. And I've had good luck with Hydrocal. I know some people haven't, but again, I was buying it by the bag, a heck of a lot cheaper than I could at the hobby store. Like I say, that wall is a good 800 pounds of Hydrocal on it.
Dan, what's your first piece of advice from a person maybe deciding that they need to move from a smaller scale to either S and O? How would they start doing that? I mean, what's your advice?
Well, hopefully they'll go to O, because that's where I am. And
Too big.
there's websites out there. Of course, the O Scale Kings, of which I'm part of, has a website that talks about O and the different choices. One of the things in O Scale that a lot of people don't realize, coming from the smaller scale, is that O Scale is not gauged properly. O Scale is actually a 5-foot gauge. And that's where P48 came in. And P48 was the designation for 4 foot 8.5 inches. As far as I'm concerned, P48 is just that. It's a gauge. A lot of people think of P48 as the pristine, perfect model. Everything's got to be right. It is that, though there are those modelers out there, but it's a gauge thing. And when people look at O, they don't realize that the gauge is wrong. So you got to do some homework. And if you're going to S scale, and there's between YouTube and what's out there, you have to look what's available. And if you think we got it bad in O, again, the poor S scale guys really got it bad. It's a builder scale no matter what. But there's a lot of stuff on the secondary market. You're never going to get the car you want. You're going to have to build it at some point. It's not like HO where virtually every boxcar in the world has been done some time. That's not the way it is in our scale. So you're going to be doing some scratch building. It just depends on how deep you're into it as far as prototypical. I modeled my own railroad because that gave me leeway to do things that other people couldn't do. If I can make up my own rules. So other guys are very prototype specific, and if they build a boxcar or detail a locomotive, it has to be exact. And there are going to be parts and things that you won't be able to find in O Scale. One of the great boons, I think, is 3D modeling, whether it's Shapeways or somebody else, where you can get these parts made or make them yourself. And that's a whole new ball game for people. And I think that's going to help both the S and O scale as far as people wanting stuff that they just can't get. But just do your homework, visit some layouts. Again, I think S as a size is just about right. You got the heft, but there's just not a lot out there. And in O scale, there's just so much more and so many more people to help out.
You made a comment about getting people from smaller scales into larger scales. The best thing I can think of is to go to these different shows like O Scale West, whatever shows, your train shows around the country, and see the different sizes in the module. And that helps a lot of people, especially if you let the young ones operate your trains for a little bit. Then the mamas and papas say, oh, Johnny's interested in that. And sometimes they'll go out and buy trains for him.
That's very true. And I think the other thing too is that the O scale people, S scale people need the RPM meets, because a lot of those guys just don't know what's out there and the level of detail that we can achieve in our models versus what they can do. And again, as they get older, eyesight gets bad, whatever the case, they're going to look to move up. And it's going to be SRO, and it's going to be scale.
Well, the main drawback for S-scale in particular is the price of incoming models. Now, I bought a 3-unit turbine from Dan Rivera, and I could have bought a car for what I paid for that thing. So
Yeah, he's the
it
only
could be pricing some individuals out of that particular scale.
Well, he's the only game in town for an importer. At least in O-scale, we're fortunate we have a few more importers. But in the S-scale world, it's river raisin, and that's about it. Everything else is plastic. So yeah, that hurts. And when he comes out with a model, it's he's only making 30 of them or 40 of them, and you got to get the money back.
Well, he brought in the S-scale 060. He had to bring in 5 different versions to meet Bo Rim's quantity.
Yeah, and that's difficult. And even look at O-scale. Look at the importers that we've lost over the years. We don't have that many left. I mean, Sunset's out there, and the fact that he can turn some of these things out, whether it's plastic or brass, at the prices he does. And of course, the old adage, you fall back on the 3-rail guys, because if it wasn't for the 3-rail guys, we wouldn't have as much as we have, because Scott can't come in with a locomotive for just a 2-rail market. So, when he does a run of locomotives, whether it's plastic diesel or brass steam, it may be 75% 3-rail, 25% O-scale or 2-rail. So
Right.
That's our saving fate. Otherwise, we'd be in a world of hurt too. And Overland's gone. Carworks is gone as far as brass imports. So there's not a lot going on, which is a shame. But there's so much stuff out there, all the way back to the old KMT engines and Max Gray. You go to shows and you see some of these engines, and yeah, they don't have all the minute detail that we have today, but you can add it to it. But I tell you what, those things will run, they'll pull the barn door off a house. So there's a lot of stuff in the stock market. It's not as expensive as people make it out to be. There's some great module layouts out. We have an article coming out pretty soon on a module layout that's being built for us. And I know the O-scale Kings are working on a module standard, but you can do a switching layout around the room in ORS, and it doesn't take up a whole lot of room. You're not going to be running, 40-car trailer trains, but you'll have fun switching and doing that. It just depends what you're into. I go to Ted's house and I see that layout. His basement's now probably 6,000 square feet, and it's a massive layout. If you ever get to Chicago, let me know. I'll take you over to his place. But it takes 5 guys to run it. I mean, just to turn it on. But that's, we don't all have that luxury. Some of us are, what I did in my basement. There's a P48 guy. Bruce helped me out in Indiana.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He's a contractor. I can never remember.
No, not him, but the other guy that has the really super detailed layout. Jim Cantor's one, but there's another guy that's got a layout that I'm sure you've seen pictures of it.
Clark.
Thank you. Yes. When I saw the pictures of that layout, I was just amazed at the detail. When I went to visit him, I was shocked at the size of that basement. It is tiny. But the way that he framed the camera for all these pictures, it looks like it's massive. It's super detailed. And it's in a basement about a third of the size of mine. So it's doable. Warner Clark, yeah, great layout.
Anybody else got any questions for Dan?
Yeah, I got one. What do you have, like a primer for someone who is thinking on getting into the S or O scale or all the different narrow gauge stuff and all that also?
I don't. And again, there's some stuff on the O-scale Steam site, and I think that's something that Bruce and I should talk about to maybe get that a little more pertinent. And that's not a bad idea. You know, if you're going to go to O, what are your choices? What's out there? And we can get some of that stuff on the website to help people out. And S scale, unfortunately, I just don't know that much about it. And that's why I like some help from some of these S scale guys too. I know SN3, SN2 is a big secret. There's not a lot of people that know it exists. And, you know, we did at our Indiana show, which unfortunately we had to postpone this year, is a O and S scale show. But we did have a S narrow gauge layout as well as an O scale narrow gauge layout, but they're few and far between, module wise anyway. But yeah, we'd like to get the information out there, because if you do want to have if you do have limited space, I mean, what's better than narrow gauge? You don't have to worry about 85-foot passenger cars and super duper diesels and 60-foot freight cars.
Hey, short
It
stuff.
opens up a whole new world. Yeah.
Well, S. There's SN2 Crew. I don't know if you've had any contact with them yet. They're a Fremo layout for S.
No.
S 2-foot narrow gauge, the main stuff. If anybody wants to go to nasg.org, that's the main S scale group. There's all kinds of stuff on there.
There's also an email that I get, it seems like every day, from the S scale. I forget what they call it now, but it's an email. People ask questions, make comments and so forth. And I get the email every day from them.
Is it flyer or scale?
It's scale.
It's probably S scale at Groups.io.
I have no idea. I just don't remember. And I don't pay any attention who sends it anymore. I know it comes in my email.
Yeah,
And
look at the prom and let me know who it is.
Okay. I will do that.
Just remember one thing. If you have an HO layout, the only thing you need to do is change the buildings, because HO is SN42 and ON30 track gauge. So just change your building and you're in a different scale. Go buy some new equipment.
That is a good point. If you've got HO scale track, standard gauge, and you leave the track in ON30, it's a little hard because you can't scale, everything cubed. But to go to S, it's only 36% bigger. You just get new buildings and new equipment running on the same track. If you like it, you can redo a few things. Unlike Frolin, I know he does FN3, but that's big.
Yeah, if
That's
you go to,
actually incorrect. I model in GN3. FN3 is a different scale.
Oh, you do GN3. I thought you did F.
I've been doing
I'm the
it
one that
for
does
2
that.
years.
No. I'm trying to think of the name of the guy in Dallas that has a bunch of GN3 all over his house.
Again, that's Barry and that's Houston. And if you wanted, I can show you some recent standard gauge equipment for you guys thinking you don't have room in O scale. How about a Ferdinand Magellan 85-foot Pullman passenger car in 22.5?
Yeah, he does a lot of stuff. He casts and prints, and I saw him at a convention which was in Dallas. I thought he lived in Dallas. Oh well.
scale.org is the other one. That's the S
Oh, yeah,
scale.
that's the SIG. Yeah.
And those guys are pretty hardcore. That's strictly scale.
That's the one that sends me the email, I think.
I bet it is. Yeah, you got on their list.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, they've got a Facebook group too.
Yep.
Yeah.
NASG has a Facebook group, but I don't think anybody's running it right now.
Well, they've got a website up, I know.
NASG's got a nice website. Again, unfortunately, some of the powers that be right now aren't too crazy about scale, as I think they should be. But it's a good organization, and they put out a magazine every other month. But it's really right now, and if you go to their conventions, it's 80% flyer, 20% scale. And I think that's something we really have to look at, because they're not going to attract new people that way.
Well, they're still heavily populated by the collectors.
Yeah.
And what we call flyer guys. On the other hand, there's a guy who does the Buffalo and Galley and high rail, but it's otherwise a scale layout. He's just got large flanges and high rail.
Right.
And
we
he
have
does
this.
excellent modeling.
We have the same problem in O scale. You know, there's these guys out there that call themselves 3-rail scale. They just can't get rid of that center rail. They put KD couplers on their cars, and they have beautiful scenery, and there's some great layouts, but they just can't get rid of that center rail.
Hate it black.
But they're out there. Yep.
What is the, I want to say, what is the normal, I guess, era that's normally modeled in the scale, or
Most of the S scale guys that I know that do scale are doing transition era, or just before.
Yeah, we
There's
did
a couple there's a couple or 3 modern modelers that do like the Lionel Flyer GEs and so forth.
Yeah, we found out the same thing. We did a huge survey in the O-Scale resource a couple of years ago, and by far and away, it's a transition area. And I think the reason why is you can just more variety of stuff you can do. You know, the other problem is people say, especially in O-Scale, well, you know, people want to model what they see. Well, what they're seeing is these huge locomotives and these 85-foot well cars. And, you know, to put a train together, your basement's got to be, you know, 800 feet long to make it look good.
That or modeling T-scale at 1 to 4.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just it. So I think the transition area, even though a lot of people, and I wasn't around in 1947. I haven't, you know, I don't know, but it interests me because you can have such a variety of equipment. And the modern guys, you know, you're pretty stuck with, there's not a whole lot of neat stuff out there, but if that's what you like and that's what you want to model, and a lot of module layouts have a lot of the more modern stuff, because, you know, they can run it. It just goes around in a circle. But, you know, with a modern layout with well cars and trailer traffic, there's not a whole lot of switching you can do. It's basically you run to one end of the layout, turn around and go back to the other end. So the transition area holds a lot of interest, as does the early 60s, you know, when the railroads were kind of going down the toilet. That's still an interesting era, because you still have a mix of locomotive types or engine types and car types. But everybody seems to want to have at least one steam engine. I don't know why, but everybody wants to have one. So you either got to backdate or do excursions.
Well, the Bachmann came out with that Chinese 282 that 3 or 4 railroads bought.
Yep.
Back in the 90s.
Yeah, that was the last of the Chinese locomotives. Yep. I
Yeah.
think that was the last build.
Either 3 or 4 railroads imported one.
Yeah, the guys out in Iowa did. I think they bought 2 of them, and then 2 others went somewhere else.
Well, there was technically 7 of those Chinese engines altogether. 3 Santa Fe's, 2 of them are on the Iowa Interstate. 1 is on R.J. Corman property, and then well, actually no, 8, because there is a QS Mikado, which is a heavy Mikado on the Boone.
Oh yeah,
on the Boone and Scenic Valley, and then there's 2 SYs. There was supposed to be a third, but one of them was bought as a replacement. One went to the Valley Railroad, the other went to the Susquehanna, and the other went to the Knox and Kane. The Valley Railroads was sold to the Susquehanna because the Susquehanna engine, well, the ship capsized and it's on the bottom of the ocean somewhere. So they're like, well, we need something. The Valley Railroad at the time was like, yeah, we'll sell it to you. And they sold it to them.
Yeah, that was after the factory closed too.
Right. That was after the factory closed because the Susquehanna wanted a steam locomotive and they couldn't just go buy another new one because, you know, the factory was shut.
They could have gone to Poland. They were still making steam over there. 280s, but
yeah, but they already paid for. I don't know the full story. I wouldn't be surprised if they got insurance or something involved because it was a loss, and I don't know. I've never heard the full story, to be honest with you. I
would
do
thought-
know that the same engine that went to the Knox and Kane back in 08 went to the Valley Railroad because at that time they needed a third steam locomotive. So the Valley Railroad has had both of the SYs that made it here at one point or another, which is kind of odd when you think about it.
So there was a couple of 210-2s or 210-0s or something.
210-2s. All three of those made it here. The two on the
Good
Iowa
about that.
Interstate are historically significant. One of them ran the last passenger train in China that was hauled by steam, I think. And then if I remember correctly, the other one hauled the last freight operation that was run by steam. Again, I think. I'd have to go back and look at my notes. The one on RJ Corman's property, that was bought because the owner wanted it, I guess. And specifically, I know they've got it parked in the shed because since he passed away. I know they're keeping it because they're like, hey, it's ours. We're going to take care of it. But they haven't really broken out. I think it's even out of its tube time at this point. So they have to go through and overhaul it to get it running again.
Well, I know the SYs, even though they were made in China, and a few of the appliances were different, were basically a USRA 282
Yeah, pretty much.
from World War. The design was from World War II.
Yeah, it was based on, standard practice, but they did their own thing. The Chinese, the 210-2s were based on Soviet designs.
Okay.
The 280, but like the fittings, a lot of the fittings were based off of American practice, I guess,
Yeah.
because they've been able to use some of those components like compressors and stuff like that. They've been able to use some of those. There's been mixed results because of the quality of construction on some of them. I've heard stories like, hey, we broke out this brand new, shut-off valve and it had a pinhole in it. And we're like, okay, it is what it is. That's run for the course these days with everything. I mean, I don't care if you're in a railroad or if you're in the heating industry, we'll still get stuff that's brand new that's no good, or you'll just find something that's just so old and you'll want to look at it and go, how did this last that long? Like just today, we had a fill pipe on a new oil tank we put in. Well, we reused the existing fill. We go out there because she mentioned, hey, it was leaking when they filled it. Well, we pull the thing out of the wall and there's a giant hole in it. Because we're like, the oil was coming out of the wall. What? And we pull it out and my guy sent us the picture and it's like, okay. And they were filling that and didn't have a problem for the longest time. It probably only, and the sad part is unless you pulled it out of the wall, you would have never known there was a problem. Because all around where it was in the wall was perfectly fine. It didn't even look any different.
Well, listen, Dan, I can't thank you enough for being here tonight. I learned a lot. I think everybody else did. You got a beautiful layout. And I want you to come back and talk to us about the cars, because I'd love to see some of those cars that I've seen you write about. And I think they're just magnificent.
Al, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Well, listen, guys, next time, this coming Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern, Charles Kraft is going to be joining us. Charles is an excellent modeler. He's got a great website. And he on his website, if you're modeling containers, container yards, anything like that, you'll be absolutely amazed at the selection of containers you can download and build in cardstock off his website. And I swear to God, you can fill up a whole room with the different models that he has on his website for free. So he'll be joining us. I think you'll really enjoy meeting him. And I hope you will come back and see you Saturday. Thanks so much for being here tonight.